Welcome to Think Deeper podcast presented by Focus Press. Jack Wilkie here once again with Joe Wilkie and Will Harrub to talk about Halloween. It is October 28th as this releases. We're a few days before it as we record. Looking at the week ahead, this has been a kind of a topic we've had a lot of discussion on the last couple of years of recording. We did an episode a couple years ago, lively debate there, and we're going to revisit some of it. We're going to see kind of where everybody stands on it, go into some other facets of it. It's a holiday that touches a lot of different Christian topics about death, about horror and blood and guts and ghouls and ghosts and witches and stuff like that. And really, what's the Christian to do about it? I know there's a lot of strong feelings about it. So Will has put together a full outline for it. And why don't you just let us, kind of explain where we're going with this and why we're revisiting it for another year of the Halloween season.
For sure, for sure. So I think every now and then I should say every now and then, hopefully more than every now and then, we get to a topic that just about every single one of our listeners has a strong feeling about, cares about in some way, is a passionate topic for a lot. There's some of them that, some episodes that we do that I think maybe some of our listeners are like, yeah, I couldn't really care less, could go either way. This is not one of those. I feel like just about everybody has an opinion on Halloween. Just about everybody has an opinion on whether or not Christians should participate in it based on the origins of it and, what kind of practices she would be doing now. So as Jack said at the top of the episode, we did this 2 years ago, but we're going to go ahead and get the kind of the qualifier out of the way. We're going to be revisiting a lot of the stuff that we did last time. It's not going to be a carbon copy or anything, but people care about this. It has been 2 years. Hopefully we have some new listeners since then. And we are not arrogant enough to think that because you listened to it 2 years ago, if you did, that you remember every single thing that we ever said on that episode. I mean, all three of us don't remember that. So, again, we're going to get that out of the way at the top of the episode. There might be some repeat stuff, but this is a very relevant topic for the modern day Christian this time of year. I was reading an article that said this was for 2023 that spending for Halloween, this blew my mind. Spending for Halloween crossed $12 billion. We typically think Christmas is the big money grab holiday, and then of course it still is. But $12 billion for Halloween is just crazy. But you look around the yard decorations, the movies that are coming out, the costumes that people, the people go all out. There's a lot of people that really get into Halloween. And so, yeah, for all those reasons, we got the deep end now. I'm excited to hear what our Focus Plus subscribers have to think or have to say about Halloween. So we're going to revisit. Ultimately, as we're about to get into the history of it, and Joe, I can turn it over to you for some thoughts on that. I've got some notes down there at the bottom of the outline if you just want to kind of read some of those or just give what you know about the history of it, because the history is relevant, and this is kind of the basis of a lot of the arguments that people use either for or against it. But before I give it to you, Joe, kind of the ultimate question that we're going to be addressing with this episode is, I don't think we can deny that there are harmful and kind of ungodly things associated with Halloween. And so the question is ultimately going to be, are there enough elements of Halloween that are harmless, that are fun, that make it acceptable for Christians to participate in it? Are there enough elements of Halloween that are harmless or fun that make it acceptable for Christians to participate in? Or the alternative side, are the origins, the historical nature, and the modern day connotations of Halloween enough to lead Christians to avoid celebrating Halloween altogether? And I felt like that was kind of the best way to sum up the two positions, and then the question that's going to drive this episode is, I think we'd all agree there's some, harmful sides. We'd all agree there's some harmless sides that, kids going around getting candy, maybe not that big a deal. But can you participate in one without the other is what we're going to be getting to. So, Joe, let's go ahead and bring you in if you have any introductory thoughts on this, and then if you would like to go ahead and get into the history side of things.
First off, I cannot believe that it's been 2 years since we were this. It flies by.
I went back and listened to it to kind of research for this. And I was talking in the episode, I was talking about how my son Jackson wasn't even 1 year old yet. I was like, oh my goodness, this is crazy. He's about to turn 3. It's just wild.
That is nuts. So you had put on here, excuse me. You had put on here actually covered it very well. And was this Folks on the Family? Their breakdown of the history, I think.
Yeah, they had a good article about it.
Yeah, that you had taken. It says Halloween originated with the pagan ritual, and it's pronounced Samhain, but it's Samhain, Samhain, if you want to look it up. Samhain is how you pronounce it. This ancient festival is a 3-day created by the Celts, or Celtic people, I suppose, but Celts in northern Europe. Translated in modern Irish, Samhain means summer's end. So the festival literally signaled the conclusion of summer and beginning of a new season. Originally, Samhain stemmed from pagan and supernatural roots through sacrifice and offerings. Throughout centuries, Samhain continued to in mutated forms until around 609 AD, when Pope Boniface IV declared a new celebration. Initially, Pope Boniface IV created All Saints' Day, or All Hallows' Day, to be celebrated before summer. All Saints' Day focuses on celebrating martyrs and saints who sacrificed their lives for the Christian faith. Later, Pope Gregory III moved the celebration to the fall season to coincide with Samhain. Over the years, All Saints' Day, or All Hallows' Day, continued its evolution into the modern celebration of Halloween. Samhain's sacrifices morphed into Halloween's handing out of a different kind of offering, candy. Nevertheless, Halloween contains roots in a pagan celebration of death and rebirth. So Samhain, or when he did it, All Hallows' Day, I believe that's November 1st is what they decided. So this is All Hallows' Eve, which is how it becomes Halloween down the line on October 31st each time. And so they really did try to reclaim what was very pagan in origin. And that is a very, I like that summation. We went off for a very long time last time. So if you want more history, go back and listen to the last one. We had like 8 to 10 minutes of history on this, going more in depth. At the end of the day, there are both pagan and Christian roots. Initially, it's pagan because of Samhain and because of it's pagan in every sense. There are rituals and there are sacrifices and things like that to the gods, little g gods. And then this Pope Boniface IV decides that he's going to reclaim, but he wasn't initially trying to reclaim Samhain. That comes with Gregory III. So that's kind of, and this is where you get into, you can look at it and I could make the case, well, it's very pagan, and you could make the case, well, actually it's Christian, because they're the ones that reclaimed it for All Hallows Eve, All Saints Day. So both sides kind of have a leg to stand on.
That's what I was going to say. Is I did read several articles in preparation for this, and there were some of them that confidently asserted that it had the origin of it is pagan, and then others that confidently asserted that the origins were Catholic. And so there is that debate there of like, well, okay, well, who started it, and essentially what are the true origins? But I do think
thing you get with the Christmas, Easter, everything is where did it actually come from? And I don't like those arguments because both sides can claim something, and it doesn't. You're just bringing your own preconceived idea into it.
Well, and let me ask this with that, because the other reason that I don't love that argument, oh, well, it's pagan origins. Do you guys think that if any practice that we do today has pagan origins, that we should just stay away? I was reading an article that gave an example. The days of the week, Monday, Thursday.
That's what I was going to say.
Wedding rings was another one I read of, like, that started out basically about magic. These are magic rings. Wow. So I didn't have enough time to research whether that was legitimate or not, but it seemed like it was. And so the argument that person was making was, that, nobody's out here trying to give up their wedding ring, and we're not trying to change the names of the week or the days of the week. So I don't know. I was curious your guys' thoughts on that. Like, let's say Halloween does have completely pagan origins. Is that enough? Should that be enough to steer Christians away?
In my opinion, all of those things shed their paganism quite well. You would not know, unless you really were doing research on it, you would not know that it had pagan origins of death and rebirth. Walk down your street. Get out the door, walk down your street, and tell me if there's any Halloween decorations out, what you see, and whether it has turned into the ultimate Christmas or Christian holiday, the way that Christmas with the nativity scenes and everything else. I think it's pretty clear to see we have not shed all paganism and left this death and rebirth behind, and the sacrifices and the darkness and the ghouls and the spirits and ghosts and everything that was really celebrated at the time. That's very dark, my opinion, which we'll get more into it. I don't want to jump ahead on the outline, but just to answer the question, I don't think it's fully shed its pagan roots. That's my biggest issue with it. Whereas I do believe the days of the week and the calendar and everything else, like if you didn't, even Christmas and Easter with the bunnies, you have to make a strong case of like, this really was pagan. Come on, a kid's getting an Easter bunny egg.
You have to
like
squint a Cadbury harder, egg. Basically, is what you're
really
saying.
got to squint harder.
Is there a material difference other than like the darkness of it, but like death is being symbolized here, fertility being symbolized by rabbits and eggs, if that's where that comes from? Like that's that is to me that is as direct. Now you can say, well, it's worse because it's about death. Well, death is a reality, and so it's how you're acknowledging it is a different thing. But like the lineage there is pretty closely connected, and they're the same way.
If we're looking at both of these as kid holidays, one of which, and this is another big issue, is Halloween has been taken over by adults. not kid holidays.
Yeah.
No adult is believing in the Easter Bunny actually bringing Cadbury eggs. Like, wow, Easter bunnies lay eggs. Not exactly. Right. Like, this is a kid thing around 10 years old. You kind of phase out and it becomes more about the resurrection, right? Whereas Halloween is something celebrated by 30-year-olds who decide to dress up in nurse outfits and, go out to the bars type of thing, go clubbing. Like, no, to me, there's a massive difference where we leave this behind as a childish thing where it's cute. And look, don't get onto my Reese's carrot sticks. If you start taking those away, I'm gonna riot or something.
Hey, those might have pagan
all
origins
orange.
though, so you got to be careful.
Tastes mighty fine though. But
that's the problem, is kind of you're picking and choosing. That's kind of my point.
No, but I'm saying it's a kid thing where a kid is not going to look at it and be scared out of his mind walking into my Easter bunny yard, which I don't do Easter bunnies, but
no,
you know what I mean?
Like, think about how many people turn Easter into Easter brunch with, cocktails kind of thing. Like, they have their own direction they take it in the same way you're talking about, like,
stretch.
Well, people do that with Christmas as well. Yeah,
I was going to say people do it on Thanksgiving. They pull out a 6-pack on Thanksgiving and are drinking like crazy. Thanksgiving's a pagan holiday.
Some people do too much with it. Okay, let's write off the whole thing. Is the way you go wrong with this. So
some
point
people,
is, yeah, some people. My point about it
$12 billion were spent on Halloween.
I don't think it was all on. I don't think it was all on getting drunk in immodest costumes of the 12 billion. I don't know how we allotted all
just
that.
6 billion of it.
Sure. The other problem with this is I think there's a bit of a Gnostic tendency here, like acknowledging death, and not in a gory way, not in a weird graveyard skeleton, ghouls and ghosts way, but like the All Hallows Eve, like we're honoring the Christian dead, and where churches used to have the cemetery, the graveyard on site, that kind of thing. We don't do that anymore. We've like run all the way the other direction, acknowledging the fall harvest season and stuff like that. That's not a pagan thing. That's a human thing. In the same way that, Christmas is, they always say, oh, it's the winter solstice festival and you're all that. Like, that didn't just belong to the pagans. That was every human, every society all over the world has the spring thing, has the summer thing, has the fall thing, has the winter thing, because we live within the year. And I think there's this tendency, the further and further we get out into modern times, to ignore all that. Obviously, most of us aren't involved in the harvest in any way, and so we don't have the connection to it that people of old used to. But Christian-wise, especially in the churches of Christ, we're very against the calendar. We're very against the Christmas, Easter, things like that. And there's, the arguments, and I understand, things like that. I'm not 100% disagreeing with that, so much as to say certain days of the year mean certain things. I mean, the leaves are falling. It is that time of year. And so acknowledging that part of it, acknowledging death somewhere along the line in our Christianity is a good thing, not in the way they're doing it. I understand that, but I think we kind of go Gnostic in an overcorrection to some of the bad ways that it has been taken, or historical ways.
I don't disagree with that. I don't disagree with the ability to focus on those things. The same way we used to carve pumpkins and Mom would bake the pumpkin seeds, and we'd light the candles in it and try to, like Dad did a Charlie Brown one year. That was incredible. Like, and always trying to figure out what we were going to carve, and it's fun and it's cool, and it's just a reminder of this is the season. The Jack and I are very against pumpkin spice, but carving pumpkins and eating pumpkin seeds was fun. To me is kind of the perfect representation of being able to celebrate the harvest, celebrate this time of year without bringing in death, destruction, and every other thing with it.
So we're going to get to this eventually, Joe, because this is something essentially where I think all three of us are going to have different answers on is, where's the line? How far is too far? Is pumpkin carving okay? Okay, well, apparently. What about hay rides? What about, what about trunk or treat, stuff like that? So I want to save that because my guess is, you just kind of just gave your stamp of approval for it. And go ahead and put it on the table. Joe is our most vocal anti-Halloween representative on this podcast.
You hadn't picked up on that to this point.
Yeah, exactly.
Jack and I's position is not quite as staunch as Joe's. Let's go ahead and do this, guys. Do you have anything else about the history? The only point I was gonna make about the history of it was, it is difficult for somebody to just make the argument, oh, well, it's got pagan origins, so we probably shouldn't do it anymore. If that's the extent of your argument, I don't think that's a good one. I think Joe fleshes it out a little bit better in the sense of it doesn't just have pagan origins. There's still heavy pagan connotations with it today. If that's your argument, I think that's a different story. But if you guys don't have anything else, obviously, Joe is probably the best person to get into this. We want to start with kind of the arguments against Christians celebrating Halloween, and then the next section being the arguments in favor of a Christian celebrating Halloween. We've kind of touched on these a little bit, but I did, if you're taking notes or something like that, I did want to kind of put it into nice, easy bullet points here for the arguments against. And Joe, you might have some other ones that I did not include on here. But the first one is kind of the modern day connotations that are associated with it. Again, touched on a little bit already, but like the ghouls, the skeletons, the gravestones in people's yards, all the slasher horror movie, the Halloween type movies that are going on right now. You could even make the jump to the criminal activity, sexualization of the costumes. I tend to think that's a bit of a weaker argument. But Joe, what would you add to this first point about kind of why Christians shouldn't celebrate it being kind of the modern day connotations?
Again, I just don't think it shed its pagan roots fully. This is why it's such a big deal in the Wiccan circles and in the pagan circles and Druid and all of, like, this is a big deal for them and the Satanists, and like people literally take house cats and sacrifice them and weird stuff. And just because somebody else is doing something weird doesn't mean we can't. But at
They
some point,
sacrifice
and
them,
this,
or they grilling them?
oh, hey, we don't know that. We don't know that. We can't say for sure. But there are a lot of negative and evil connotations with paganism that I just don't think have been shed. Whereas you can look at Christmas, but Christmas is not exactly. You can say it's a pagan holiday or all the way back. How many pagans do you know getting out there and celebrating it and like dancing around circles and praying to their gods
That's
on
a
that
fair
day?
point. Yeah.
Not a ton. Whereas Halloween is their day to go do those things, and I don't like my kids being around the darkness. You don't know that any house they walk up to, like especially Dixon, Tennessee, of all places, has a really weird, like Wiccan occult hub. I don't know what it is, but there's like they are around there. There's a coffee shop that's basically dedicated to them in downtown Dixon. So little Tennessee Dixon, my kids walk in and they happen to see this stuff. Like I'd rather see it on my terms. And when we put this right in front of them, we don't know what they're going to see, and we don't know what they're going to be told, and we don't know who they're going to run across. And yes, I mean, as you had on here, I think it's a holiday surrounded or centered around darkness, centered around all
this
this
is
other
the
things.
second point, kind of. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, centered around this stuff. And I just think it's troubling to put it in front of the kids where they don't have any. My kid needs to know about death. I'm with Jack. I don't think being Gnostic about it or acting like, it doesn't exist. I'm perfectly fine having times where we do celebrate the saints, whatever it is. I don't actually have a problem with that. And some people can look at it and go, that's Catholic. Look, there have been some fantastic Christians who have lived before us that I think it's okay to honor them and to celebrate them the same way that, your grandparent on their birthday, maybe they died 10 years ago, but on their birthday, maybe you're thinking about it. We did this for my grandma and kind of celebrated some of her recipes and just shared some stories and such. And it was great. I'm fine doing those things. That's a proper celebration of death that I can get behind and that my kids, I can explain it to. When they're walking up to somebody's, house to get a Snickers bar and they happen to see the ghouls and the witches and the ghosts and the skeletons crawling out of the ground and the scary things that pop out and get you, like, no thanks. I don't really want my kids' first understanding of death to be in this way where it's scaring the living daylights out of them and they don't have any concept of how to handle this. Like kids, you have to realize kids cannot grasp the concrete or really, I should say, the abstract the way that we can.
What about when your kid's 11 or 12? Your kids are, Harrison's what, 6 right now? So that's one thing. What about when they're 11 or 12?
I mean, at that point, it's almost like we've gone so long without it, getting involved in that. And this is where you start to get into the very immodest costumes. You're starting to get into, at 12 years old, my son's going to be going out and seeing some chick in her mini skirt costume, thinking that she's something because she's a 25-year-old still celebrating it like she's 6. I don't want that either. So I would rather just avoid the day altogether. And the other thing is, even at 12, this is really where boys can get into the ghouls and everything else. I don't think it is good to dwell on that.
Hey guys, I want to tell you about Think Deeper Live, our first ever in-person event. It's scheduled for Saturday, November 16th, starting at 9 a.m. We're going to be talking about God's design for gender roles. It's tentatively scheduled to be in Burns, Tennessee. We want to get a head count first so we don't outgrow the venue we have it planned for. So it would help us out a lot if you'd go to thinkdeeperlive.com and RSVP. Let us know how many people are coming, and then give us an email address so we can zero in the exact location where it's going to be and let you know a couple of weeks ahead of time. So check that out, thinkdeeperlive.com.
Here's the reason I ask, and this is going to get us into the third argument against it that a lot of people making is just abstain from every form of evil. Obviously, 1 Thessalonians 5:22. I do not disagree hardly with anything that Joe said. However, to provide an alternative perspective here, Joe, and this is not to put you on the spot. It's going to sound like it is, but Joe, you're a big concert guy. You're a big music guy. Would you take your kids to a concert? 14, 15. The reason I ask is you're kind of mulling over your answer. I would argue there's way more immodesty at concerts than there is with Halloween costumes. Furthermore, the connotations associated with concerts are you go there to basically party, drink a lot of alcohol, and that's what people do. Same thing, you can make the argument for sporting events. I'd say not as much as concerts. That's why I kind of went with that example. But and to be fair, there's gonna be listeners thinking, no, I wouldn't take my kids to a concert either. Understandable. But I guess that's kind of we can look at Halloween and we can look at, trick-or-treating like, oh my goodness, death, gravestones, goblins, ghouls, awful. Oh, but a concert's harmless. What are your thoughts on that?
First, I'd depend on the concert. I mean, if I was going to see like Megadeth or something like that, and probably not. First off, that it's not good music, but second off, that type of stuff. Second off, no, I would not take my son to anything like that. A Coldplay concert or something, sure. Maybe I'd do something like that at 14, 15 years old. So I'd be very selective on the type of concert. You're right. They'd see immodesty. I don't think immodesty is the strongest case for this. You're going to see immodesty everywhere, but I will say immodesty is particularly bad because they can get away with very revealing outfits, things like that you're not going to get away with most of the time. The fishnets and things like that women think are appropriate on the 31st of October, but no other time of the year, unless you're going to specific places. That's not the strongest argument. I do think the surrounding of death and demons and destruction and just the glorification of death. Death is a natural part of life. Going back to Jack's point, it's a natural part of life. There are times where we can celebrate the dead in an appropriate way, not a pagan way, something like that, or we can just remember them maybe. Not glorifying the darker parts of death and destruction and demons and things like that. Because if it was about death, where are all the angels? There's some of those. You're not really seeing a whole lot of angels popping up in people's yards around October 31st.
They're not scary for kids, yeah.
Correct. It's Beetlejuice. It's the demons, things like that. So that would be my argument for why. Abstaining from every form of evil. I don't want any, like my kids really dealing, or I don't know. I don't want them participating in all of that. And at some point, I think you're going to be forced to do that.
The question is like the level of extraction. Okay, we haven't done it every year I've had kids, but a couple of years we have. We're not going somewhere where people are dressed immodestly like that. And so that is not even a factor for it. Yeah, I hate that people do that on this day. That's not involved. That's not something I'm having to worry about. Same thing about like you try and avoid the demon ghoul thing. And there, I was part of a church that had a trunk or treat that strictly kept that and told a guy, take your mask off. You don't get to hand out candy dressed like that. Which was good. I mean, because we went to one last year and there was a guy walking around with a big, skeletal clown, insane, whatever it is. And it's like, this is a church parking lot and you got a bunch of 6-year-olds running around like this. Come on. So yeah, I mean, the ability to extract that, but you talked about carving pumpkins growing up or having candy or things like that, or watching the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown. So I think we're just disagreeing on degree, because it seems like you agree that you can observe some of the trappings of the day in your own way to the degree that you extract yourself from those other things. And so I don't know that it's so much of a disagreement as it is a disagreement in degree.
I'd agree. I think there's a big deviation from carving pumpkins, staying inside, watching a movie, and having some candy versus going out and hoping there's no razor blades in the apples and hoping they're not coming upon some door that's gonna. I know that's the thing.
I know. The other thing about it is almost nobody goes door to door anymore. Like that is a dying thing. And so yeah, no, I wouldn't take even in my own neighborhood, I wouldn't take kids to the house, just because again, like it's a low trust society. You just don't know what people are. The people that like to jump out and scare kids. No, I'm not taking my 2-year-old up to somebody's door who might be looking to do that. And so again, that's a degree of extracting yourself from it to the degree that you are. Whereas you're saying, well, it's staying inside eating candy. Well, why is that okay? It's the associations of the day.
I wouldn't say it's not the associations of the day. It's associations with darkness and death and destruction and ghouls and demons and everything else that I have a problem with.
See, that's what I'm saying. We don't disagree. And so,
right. And you're saying you can get away with it at the church parking lot, things like that. First off, that's not always the case, as you learned last year. Second off, when we start participating in the typical ways that everybody else does, but we're a degree back from where everybody else is, like, okay, we can
Yeah,
dress
well,
up, we do all
but
these
that's
things,
what you're doing with eating the
but
candy. I
it's
mean, like you're a degree
but
back. You're a hair,
no,
a degree and a
because
half further back, kind of thing.
I don't think it's a degree and a half. I think you are opening up to your kids are going to be asking, well, why can't we
Well,
go trick or treating? Why can't we do this? Why can't we do that? My kids aren't going to ask that because my kids are going to view the holiday as fundamentally different. It's a harvest day where we are enjoying the carving of pumpkins. We're enjoying the family time. I think we've reclaimed the holiday, and by we, our family did this. We didn't go trick or treating. I think we reclaimed the holiday to something that's positive, that is focused on the harvest, that is focused on a time of family and fun, rather than avoid this and don't look here and make sure you walk around this person's and let's skip this person's house
but
and
that's to
yeah,
my
don't go
point
to
with
that
the
guy's
concert,
car.
like other aspects of life separated from Halloween, concerts and things like the
I think
beach,
it's
for
way
goodness sakes.
different.
Like,
Yeah, we don't
what's
go to the
different about
beach.
it?
Not when everybody else is there. Like you do try to avoid
Okay,
it
but
where
there,
possible. So if it's a height of summer in July and I go to Cocoa Beach where everybody's going to be, do you think I'm taking my 12-year-old there or even my
hopefully
6-year-old
not.
there or myself there? Probably not. So it's the same concept, which is I know I'm going to run into a lot of things that I disagree with and I'm going to have to explain to my kid. I don't want to be
But
a
this,
helicopter parent where I never do, but I want to explain it on my terms. You could say, well, it's one time a year. True, but how much can kids possibly grasp of fear? And this is a holiday based around fear, which is not a Christian thing. I don't think us
but this
putting
is the
ourselves in a
first.
state of fear, and this is why slasher films and horror and everything else comes in. It's a fear based holiday. Is that appropriate for kids? It is. It
But
should
this
be
is
a
the
kids' holiday.
first. So, but this is the first point I have in under the section of arguments in favor of Christian celebrating it, Joe, is do you think you can participate in kind of the harmless and kid friendly side of Halloween? Do you, or let me ask this, do you think that that is condoning if somebody chooses to do that, if somebody chooses to go to trunk or treat, if somebody chooses to, their kids dress up, kind of again, what I would look at is maybe the harmless side of things, is that condoning the immoral activity surrounding it? Because my answer to that would be no. I mean, again, there's things like I brought up the concert example. I won't use that again. Hollywood. I feel like Hollywood, talk about as immoral as it gets. I can go watch a movie in the theaters, or I can watch a movie, and I'm not condoning all the atrocious things that the Hollywood industry does. I'm just enjoying the movie, maybe enjoying the innocent side. I see somewhat of a parallel there. So my argument would be that one can participate in the harmless, kid-friendly side of Halloween without condoning all the immoral activity surrounding it. To Jack's point, I think maybe all three of us just disagree on what would be defined as the harmless side of it. But that's basically my position. So I was curious your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think you could. I just think that you're opening the door to a lot of other stuff, in my opinion. I think you could go to theoretically, you could have the kids dress up. I'm not against kids dressing up, as much as it may sound like it is. You have to be very careful where you're like if it was a family and we all our families got together and did this, which our church hates Halloween, so this has never happened at our church. But if as Jack had it, you said Pritchett, right? Where they did get together, I don't have as much of a problem where it's strictly enforced. The kids get together, they get to dress up. Like I'm never condemning anybody for this. Let me just go on the record and say I don't condemn anybody for this. You guys are still my friends and we're still going to talk after this. Maybe we'll see, but
I'm not giving you any
but
candy. That's
Just
for
not on
sure.
the 31st.
it's all right. I'll buy my own. Yeah, I'll buy it on the first because that's when it's cheap. But um, anyway, like I don't have a problem as much with it. I just think that when you open the door to it, kids are going to want more and more and more, which is always what happens. Kids will absolutely want to start participating in other things, and their friends are going to go this place, and their friends are going to go that place. If you pull back from it and go, we just don't celebrate it in that way, then you save yourself a lot of questions down the line of peer pressure where, hey, they're going here and they're going to do this. Can I go with them? And you got to say no. And you got to draw the line. And well, it was fine here, but it's not there. Like, I don't know. I think you just, it's not that that's every parent's prerogative. You're just going to save yourself a lot of headache, I think, if you draw the line in a specific spot back here. But I'm not condemning anybody, and I don't necessarily think that's wrong. If you can assume that, hey, everybody there is going to be kosher, it's going to be cool. It's not going to be a bunch of demons popping out from the trunk or treat trying to scare kids.
Yeah. All right.
So yeah,
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think we disagree in degrees rather than total black and white, two sides of a line kind of thing. But I think that kind of is going to be where we end up going with this is what we do agree on. We're not quite there yet as to what we need to cover. I mean, the Bible does have certain things that you brought up, the witchcraft thing, sorcery in the Bible, things like that, and like you'll see cauldrons on people's lawns, right, and things like that, and that, like that's kind of part of this, and obviously the witches and things like that. So you brought up the death and demons and gore thing some, and I that's again we'll get to the parts we agree on. Um, on the other hand, that's kind of the funny irony here is you are the big Harry Potter guy of the three of us. And so what about that part of it, especially as touches on Halloween? Because that's one of the other things you talk about, like the pagan roots in it. And Harry Potter, it's kind of funny. It brings in some Christian themes. She even quotes scripture in the books. But on the other hand, like it's witchcraft wizards in a school, stuff like that. And Halloween is like the big thing. They do it really big at the school in the books, if I remember correctly.
And Christmas, so you know.
No, they do Yule. They do Christmas, but they do the Yule thing too, don't they? They have like a big Yule ball or celebration or something.
Yeah, on one of the books, yeah.
Yeah. So
So
go ahead.
yeah, the way
Which is again, so what, real fast, just to preface it, it's funny because a lot of people would be very in line with Joe on his Halloween take and very opposed to Joe on his Harry Potter take. Harry Potter triggers up a lot of emotions for people.
Yeah, he's kind of like there's this weird Venn diagram that usually overlaps a lot of anti-Halloween, anti-Harry Potter.
Right.
He's the outlier here.
Yeah, the reason why is okay. So, a couple things. First off, no, I would not let my 6-year-old read Harry Potter. The first books, I don't think there's as much problem. There's not that much darkness and death and things like that, and people can. Okay, sure, there's a little bit, but not much. By the time you get the fourth book, it starts to get a lot more dark on those things. But I think that is something that through a book form and when you are old enough to kind of digest some of these principles, you can. I also think reading it is way different, even and the watching it. I mean, I push that off probably even further. The reading it, I think, is different than having it put in your face completely with all of the, I don't know, walking up on somebody's lawn and seeing all these things. The other thing is, this is highly, highly fictional, fictitious. Like, and she makes it very clear, like this. Look, I didn't make this to be surrounded in the occult, like you said. She's got Christian themes in there, and if we're gonna do that, then my biggest issue is you have to cut out Lord of the Rings as well, and Christians aren't near as as okay with that one because there are witches and there are magicians. Obviously, you got Gandalf and such that are able to do magic in a positive way in that book. It's very fictitious. People aren't willing to cut out Lord of the Rings because whoa, hey, Tolkien's a Christian, but they're not going to do a J.K. Rowling because they will because she's not a Christian. Like similar things, it's a similar hero's journey. It's way different when you have 7 books laid out in a hero's journey type situation than it is for my 6-year-old to walk up on somebody's lawn and have a scare ghoul pop out and have them wet their pants. Like, to me, there's a massive difference where one is very real, the death and the gravestones. And my son just asked me, what is that? It's a skeleton. Like, it's a skeleton. We tried to explain the bones. It's like, oh, I had no idea, but that's very real. Skeletons exist. Gravestones exist. The monsters and such, they need to be old enough to be able to digest it. And I think book form's different. So that would be my understanding is one is based in reality and one is based very much in the fictional.
I get your Lord of the Rings thing. I think you'd have an even better argument to go against Star Wars. Very Eastern religion, the Force.
Yeah.
I mean, the Force is magic. The Jedi are just space wizards kind of thing. And so, I mean, you could make a case if you have to be anti-Harry Potter, that you got to be anti-Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, whatever else. Even superheroes, whatever. You've got just these people that can do supernatural stuff.
Doctor Strange.
Yeah, that one gets pretty weird. The thing about Harry Potter, I would say, is that does bring it a little bit closer is Star Wars is a galaxy, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away kind of thing. And Lord of the Rings is kind of this middle, or it's like it's fantasy, so you're in a different world. Harry Potter lives in London. It's a parallel world to us kind of thing. And the other thing is, when you go up to Halloween and these lawns that you don't want your kids walking on look like the set of Harry Potter. And Lord of the Rings is very much a different kind of thing.
They don't look like Star Wars.
They don't look like Star Wars. They're like, those are the mental separation for a kid is way different than Harry Potter. There was a really funny tweet about like the most unrealistic thing about Harry Potter is it's set in the 90s and nobody commented on Michael Jordan and the Bulls having quite a run. But like other than not acknowledging those things, like it very much is set in our world, a parallel world, a secret underworld in our world right now. And again, the imagery is the cauldrons, the things like that.
You just say the word sorcery, nobody thinks Star Wars. People think Harry Potter. And I don't have a problem with Harry Potter, but
But I would say it's a similar thing. The other thing is Muggles, Quidditch. I mean, she's like literally making up words that don't actually exist, and she is setting it in a place where, okay, it's based in our world, but kind of not. Like it's laid over our world where there is and that's why I think it's appealing to people is this thought that, man, this could be happening and we didn't even know it type of thing. But it's very fictitious.
Just to make the parallel with Halloween there for people, again, I don't really have a problem with Harry Potter, but somebody might make the argument just because of the sorcery connotations with it, it's better to stay away from it. Which I'm assuming you don't necessarily have a problem with the people who think you just disagree. But I can see a similar line of argumentation to what you're doing with Halloween. It's not identical, but I can see a similar line of argumentation with everything associated with it. It's probably better for Christians to just stay away. And that's where I do think, to the Lord of the Rings point and other things, I see why people make that argument. I just think you have to be very careful because that can apply to a lot of things. The negative connotations associated, staying from every form of evil. So no Harry Potter. It's like there's a lot of stuff to that. So I guess that would be my only addition to it. And I guess maybe not that we're interviewing you here, Joe, but I guess the question for you of like what is different about it if people are going to make the same line of argumentation about the connotations?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say exactly what you said. Like, okay, that's perfectly fine. First off, we know people at our church are death on Harry Potter, no pun intended. Like they just don't want anything to do with it, and that's perfectly fine. We're going to get along. I probably should not be quoting Harry Potter from the pulpit, so not that I would anyway. But you know what I mean. Like that's not to upset anybody. We try to stay away from it. We're not going to talk about it. We can both be Christians, but they also, I think, are perfectly fine with those other things. And I'd say, okay, well, examine it. Harry Potter gets a bad rap for that reason, but there's a lot of things that kind of dip into it. Percy Jackson, a lot of people are fine with Percy Jackson. That's all Greek gods, mythology, things like that. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with, a lot of people are okay with the Hunger Games. That's messed up. Like, I don't know. It's just weird. But everybody draws different lines on what they find to be, or even Twilight. Okay, there's vampires and werewolves or whatever it is. Or, I don't know. Werewolves? I don't know. Stupid. But whatever they are, like everybody was fine with that one for a second. So everybody's got different lines. Yes, Harry Potter, because it's based in witchcraft. Hogwarts is literally a school of witchcraft and wizardry. Yeah, but it's so fictitious and so made up that it's, in my opinion, just becomes a good story. There's a difference between literally the occult and what they were doing in Babylon and what they were doing in Egypt and like some of that stuff where it's very based in reality. That to me is more Halloween, very based in reality of like legitimately doing these things. You could say Harry Potter dips into it, no doubt. I imagine.
Well, I mean, the witches downtown, like you were talking about, that you have a big problem with, are very much in the same mold of Harry Potter style witches, like the Eye of Newt potion kind of thing. Like that's how they view themselves, and the same imagery, the black cats, things like that. And so, like I said, I think it's just a lot closer to real world, which is what makes it the challenge there. Which again is why I don't understand like I don't want my kids understanding or being around this association. But I like this association. Again, everyone can
all
do
in good time.
They will. So
yeah, all in good time. So my 6-year-old's not gonna be reading Harry Potter.
Go ahead, Jack. If you want to take
I was just gonna say that's enough on the disagreement. I think there's a lot of stuff we do agree on this, sure. And this is one of the things that really annoys me about my generation. The extended adolescence thing. Everybody just wants to hang on to, like, I knew people that trick-or-treated into their 20s. Like, okay,
that's a little ridiculous.
Drive over to Walmart, buy the candy for yourself kind of thing. But they wanted to get in they wanted to chase that feeling. Halloween was their favorite as a kid. And it was a thing as a kid, but like the way millennials have transformed it. Number one, Joe brought up earlier, into an adult holiday. Number two, the decorations have totally changed since we were a kid. You might hang a ghost out front of your house. Now it's a zombie graveyard stuff. I like just driving around town. I'm sick of having to be like, all right, kids, look the other way because there's a guy with his head chopped off in somebody's front yard. Like, this is weird. I wanted to tell you guys about my new ebook, Christ's Co-Rulers, Understanding Christian Political Engagement, drawn from essays I've written over the last few years, but also featuring a number of new entries on some of the day's most pressing issues like immigration, abortion, and addressing those that say that Christians shouldn't be involved in the political realm, and laying out the plan for how we can impact the world for good under the lordship of Christ. So check that out. You can get it on Focus Press, you can get it on Amazon, or it is a perk for paying subscribers at jackwilkie.co. So pick up a copy of Christ's Co-Rulers on one of those platforms today.
The other side of that that's interesting is what generation was really the first generation to say, kids, I'll take a pass on that, was millennials. And that's, again, so my whole struggle with this is my son, who's 3, gets very animated and excited about just about anything. And so, man, I'm just like, man, he would love dressing up. He would love, trunk or treating, getting candy or whatever. And it's like, yeah, no, I don't want him exposed to all the stuff Joe's talking about. But at the same time, do I just completely shut down the excitement of dressing up and getting candy and that kind of thing just for that? But what's interesting about that is that's my level of excitement, is I want to show that something that was a part of my childhood to my son. Well, millennials are the big anti-kid generation. And so rather than getting to experience the joy of maybe passing on Halloween, what do they want to do? Still participate in it themselves. They still want to go dress up. They still want to go get candy. They still want to go do all the haunted houses and things. And I don't know. I think that's just an interesting part of Jack's point there, is we get excitement from passing these things on to our kids and the joy or the thrill that they get. If you don't have kids, what's left for you? Especially if you view Halloween as a kid holiday. It's like, well, I guess I can't celebrate anymore. So they choose to continue with it. And since they're adults now, they make it far more based on adrenaline rushes and jump scares and all that than maybe it would be if we just focus on it for the kids. Does that make sense? That was just kind of an interesting point, I think.
That is very interesting now that I think about it, because Will, you did celebrate Halloween, right? You dressed up growing up?
Yeah.
Jack, you probably did way more than I did. I think I did once or twice. Mom dressed me up literally as Joseph, and my sister was Mary. I think that was one of the only times I ever did. So I don't have this warm and fuzzy of, I want to pass it to my kids. It just didn't exist for me. We had really gotten away from it. So I don't have the nostalgia, really reclaiming this and helping with the kids. And to me, it's like, well, we stayed away from it growing up. I'll just continue to stay away from it. So that's a very interesting point, I guess I hadn't considered, is there's a lot of people that want to bring that. Same thing with Christmas. The best part of Christmas is no longer the gifts for us. It's seeing the look on our kids' faces, right?
Well, because I think, just as you finish your point there, that's it for me. Is for me growing up, everything was harmless. Like, we went trick-or-treating, we got candy. Yeah, there were some scary costumes, but as a 10, 11, 12-year-old, I didn't really think much of it. And again, that's my anecdotal story. For everybody else, and there's people that get scared out of their minds and all that. But yeah, I think.
But you're right. I mean, it was fundamentally different, even from you as a kid, and you're the youngest, obviously. So from when Jack and my oldest sister and such, it has majorly changed into a $12 billion industry. That was not the way it was growing up. You had a lot of kids in bed sheets who are, trying to be ghosts, very much Charlie Brown type of stuff, right? Yeah, you had some elaborate costumes, but that was the outlier. Nowadays, people are spending $200 on some Transformers costume or looking like Iron Man or whatever else. And it's like, my goodness, guys, grow up, because kids don't have the money for that. So, or it's the parents on Instagram who are really trying to make this look like they're the greatest parents of all time. Their kid got the one cool outfit. I don't know. It's a commercial holiday rather than a kid's holiday. And this is the point I made on the last podcast that I think still stands. Is this a holiday for the kids, or is it a holiday for the adults? It at one point, I think, was, excuse me, a holiday for the kids. And this is when when we were all growing up. I think it very much was primarily for children. At some point, it has shifted into a holiday for adults, and we are still putting kids into a holiday that is primarily for adults these days, in my opinion. Can we reclaim it for the kids? Potentially, but this is the way of the world. McDonald's is doing the same thing. Where's all of the fun? We've gone off on this before, but where's all the fun, bright yellows and reds and Ronald McDonald that you sit by, the little thing on the plaster thing on the bench that you get your picture with? The whimsy of kids is gone. Now it's all blacks, browns, and grays, and it's McCafe, right? And you see this across the board, where all of the whimsy and fun of maybe the 80s and the 90s and even early 2000s to a certain degree are gone. Now it's all commercial.
All
it's
kids movies have to have adult innuendos and all that.
Exactly. I mean, everything has been ripped away from the kids, and this is a generation that hates children. So I feel like Halloween's no different. It hates kids. It's not for the kids anymore. We're still trying to juxtapose, we're still trying to put kids on that, or, to put them into what is now primarily whereas I look at the difference of Christmas or the difference of Easter bunnies and things like that, it still is kid based. There still is a lot. Yeah, you get, adults get gifts, but it's still very much around the kids.
So let's get into a few things here, because one of the questions I want to ask here is essentially, from each of y'all's viewpoint, then how are you, from a very personal anecdotal perspective, how are you going to celebrate this time of year with your family? Because I think what's interesting about this is all three of us have kids that are still in the pretty early stages of life. Obviously, Jack and Joe, you both have a 6-year-old, so but that's still pretty young, still very foundational. And so I am curious what you guys. I mean, we are, as we're recording this, like 8 days away from it, and as it posts, we'll be 3 days away from it. So I live in a neighborhood where there very much will be people coming to the door. Do we give them candy? Do we shut all the lights off? Do we, so I want to ask that here in just a second of like, how do you plan to observe it? But I want to get into a few more things very quickly. Scary movies. This has been one that has always been kind of a touchstone for me, in the sense of I enjoy scary movies sometimes. I haven't watched one in probably 3 or 4 years, just because I sometimes feel like maybe I should not. Like it's an area that I feel like I'm growing in maturity on. Man, 4 or 5 years ago, I enjoyed those, and not the slasher Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger. I've never seen any of those. Like I don't really care for those. But the Conjuring type movies, Insidious or
Quiet
Annabelle or
Place.
something like that. Actually, funny enough, I was never really big fan of Quiet Place. But yeah, stuff like that where the scare of it is the thrill of it is kind of the point of the movie, versus you're watching a movie for a good storyline or whatever. So what are y'all's thoughts on that? Again, I've kind of grown. I haven't watched those in a long time, but there's still a part of me. It's like, yeah, I mean, I would enjoy that. And I know a lot of people do. That's something that's like, okay, when my kids get older, maybe for Halloween, do we stay in? Do we watch a scary movie? I don't know. Maybe that's something that should also be off limits. What are y'all's thoughts on this side of things?
I think we're all in agreement. Like the blood and guts thing is really beyond the
Texas
pale for
Chainsaw
Christians.
Massacre. Yeah, it's probably
Yeah,
not.
I mean Saw, and I mean just there's so
You have
many of
something
those.
fundamentally wrong with you if you enjoy those. I'm sorry. I'm just going to go out and say it. You have something fundamentally wrong with you if you enjoy watching
Hold
people
up your
get.
mug, Joe. Hot takes with Joe. This is your hot take right here.
This is a stone cold take, or at least it should be. What is wrong with people who don't get like an empathetic response to seeing body parts chopped off of another person type of thing? Like, you have something wrong with you if you enjoy it. Go to therapy, come see me. Feel free to reach out and I will walk you through it if that's something you fundamentally lack empathy. Sorry, I just can't stand that. I don't know how you get around that as a Christian.
Yeah, this is one of those where it's like, well, what's your Bible verse? Well, yeah, Paul didn't say thou shalt not go to the movie theater and see a scary movie, or like a horror or a chainsaw movie or whatever. Like, this is principles and sensibility, feel, things like that. Of there's an evil to that. There's as you said, Joe, like a lack of human compassion for other people, like wanting to see that happen. It just, again, the way it lights up the brain. I know there's been studies on that, of
Because
like
what
the brains of people who enjoy horror movies, or while they're watching them and things like that. So
Because
yeah, I
what's
mean,
different about
go
that,
ahead.
and like somebody would say, oh, the Patriot or Braveheart, it's like that is first of all, it's historical, but second of all, that is a part of the movie where the point of the movie is something completely different, telling a story. The point of all these movies is what? The gore, like that's what people go. They might tell you
Right.
otherwise. They're not going for the stellar acting. They're
Right.
not going for the what's his name, Christopher Nolan storyline here. No, they're going, like, the very point of those movies is to watch people's heads get chopped off and watch all the stabbings and all. Like, that's why people go to watch those things. And so I just, in case anybody tries to make that parallel, like, oh well, Braveheart's really violent, like, not the same.
And I would say there are war movies that are just so gratuitous in their violence that I'd put them in the same category. But I mean, if you're going to depict a war, yeah, things might happen. And I mean, when that's the hard part about Christian entertainment is there's a large gray area that is up to personal conscience, and then there's stuff where you can be like, all right, that's enough, the
Yeah.
pornography stuff, things like that. And I really think I'm there with Joe, like saying, look, a slasher film, seeing people's guts spilled open, decapitations, arms cut off, like, no, it's just not needed. Now, as
Sure.
far as like a more generic scary that you're bringing up, it's not really my thing. I think I brought up A Quiet Place, really not that scary. That's probably the only one of those I've seen.
I think that's probably why I didn't like it all that much.
Yeah, maybe so. Or even like Signs back in the day, which wasn't all that scary, but it was kind of the well, what's going to come out kind of thing.
Thriller.
Um, it's interesting, like the spiritual mental process of wanting to be scared and wanting to fear, and then I mean, you go to a movie that makes you cry, you go to a movie that makes you laugh, you go to a movie that like you're invested in the
Elicits
movie, and
emotion.
so
Yeah.
yeah, and so it makes sense that fear would be one of those that a movie can bring. But I don't know about chasing that all the time is healthy. But I have a harder time drawing any hard line on that.
Yeah, because I think it is an adrenaline rush. People jump out of airplanes for adrenaline rushes. They
Roller
do the squirrel
coasters, yeah.
suits and roller coasters. And I think there's an adrenaline rush. The difference that I would draw is you are putting imagery in your mind that once it goes in, it doesn't come out. We have to be very careful on the imagery that we're putting in, because we are susceptible to those things. And if you are constantly chasing that, I might find a different way to seek adrenaline. The other thing about adrenaline chasers is, I'm not saying there's something fundamentally wrong with you either, but there is a psychological reason why we do chase adrenaline in that way. And every now and then it's perfectly fine. If you are an adrenaline junkie, usually there's reasons why. So, of course, I'm going to take a therapy stance on it, but I do think that there are psychological reasons and emotional reasons why we seek adrenaline all the time. So, I'm not against it. I don't think you're going to hell or anything like that for watching a horror movie, a thrill movie type of thing. But be very careful on what you're putting in your mind, because once it goes in, it does not come out.
Because there are very different levels of horror movies. Again, the slasher films, but there's the demonic ones, and then there's just the, I don't know, thriller kind of scary
Jump
ones
scare,
that are right, that are not all the same. So, yeah, I would agree. So we got a few other things on here. We can hit these kind of rapid fire because we still have a think fast to get to, and then I do again kind of just want to ask you guys, how are y'all going to be observing it from, obviously you two kind of have somewhat different perspectives. And again, I got a 3-year-old. He's really excited about stuff. What am I going to do? That's something I've been wrestling with now for a while, but haunted houses, that's a big one. Again, did that when I was 16, 17, 18, enjoyed it a lot. Haven't done it in 4 or 5 years. I think I actually, as I was listening to the last episode, I think I said in the last episode, I will probably never do that again for all the reasons that you guys, mentioned. But yeah, I mean, that's something I did growing up. A lot of Christians do it and don't really see a problem with it. So we have that, decorating your lawn, and then should churches host trunk or treat? I don't know how quickly we want to hit these, but I'll kind of give my take and then pass it over. Again, haunted houses, as much as it pains me because I did enjoy them growing up, I probably will not be sending my kids to any haunted, even when, if they're, 19 out of the house and want to, out of my control. But while they're in my house, I'll probably advise against it just for the purpose of, I mean, they got zombies coming up to you with chainsaws, and it's, it's very just darkness in your mind. Decorating your lawn, I don't decorate for any holiday, so that probably won't be something that I do. I don't really have a big problem with it if somebody wants to, put, I don't know, a skeleton outside, or we got some of our neighbors, they've got like spiders and stuff hanging up. I don't really have a big problem with that. Obviously, the ones that are just way, trying to get a scare out of little kids, I'm not a big fan of. And then churches hosting trunk or treats, I don't have a problem with that. I do, based on everything you guys said, in the sense of monitoring the costumes, monitoring the trunks. Everyone that I've ever been at has had very gracious people who are not really trying to scare anybody. They maybe like they're just there for the kids, and so I have not seen maybe the more cynical side where that you guys have, where people are trying to scare the kids. So for that reason, I don't have a huge problem with it. I think it's a healthy way for kids to, again, enjoy the harmless side, maybe without going around the neighborhood and seeing all the scary stuff. So that's my quick rundown on those three. I don't know who wants to go next.
Yeah, well, I'll just say the trunk or treat thing. I think there is a real market there for a church to brand it that way, as a horror-free, modest trunk or treat. So people will know you're going to come here. You're not going to have to deal with any, bloody masks, any horror, horrifying clowns, things like that. Things that are going to scare your kid. It's going to be, and you can allow a wide gamut within inside of that. It doesn't all have to be Winnie the Pooh and Mickey Mouse kind of stuff. And
No
so there's, no Mickey Mouse. Yeah, that's right. Well, and Winnie the Pooh is also a Disney property now, isn't he?
Oh,
So,
that's right.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, so
So
neither
no
of those
Star
for
Wars,
Joe,
no
yeah.
nothing. You can do Harry Potter though, right, Joe?
Harry Potter.
Sorry.
That's right. That's right.
Now your church will have to make a call on that one. Erase the little lightning bolt on the kid's head and take his stick away. But the but and then the modest thing, like we're not going to have any. You don't have to have those concerns. Market it that way. I think that would be something a lot of families are looking for, because again, I went to a Church of Christ one last year, and there were multiple people where it's like, I don't want my kid around that. Don't be that guy. And so yeah, I think if you're going to do it, really make that a thing. Make it like, yeah, we're really not doing the blood and guts thing. We're not doing the immodesty thing. You can trust us for that.
I'm going to assume on haunted houses and decorating your lawn, you're out.
I mean, the lawn decorations, as Will said, like there's a line. Haunted houses, I don't think are a generally good thing. I'm certainly not for them, but
Yeah. I mean, I think my take on that one. The decorating your lawn, You drive down the street,
Real fast, Joe. Interesting. Did either one of you guys have y'all ever done a haunted house before?
No.
Wow. Okay.
I've seen like
Yeah,
some videos, things like that of walkthroughs, certain things. Like, yeah, no, I don't
I'm
really need
smarter than that. Just kidding.
that.
Just kidding. No, I mean again, I have no desire to be scared out of my mind for something I have no control over. I just don't. I mean, I think again, it's
Obviously, I'm
there's
not talking
enough
about like
things
it within the last 5 years. I mean, y'all are grown adults. I meant when y'all were like teenagers, y'all still didn't at all. Gotcha.
no, no. Yeah, you learn to put up with enough fears, such as November 5th coming up. There's enough fears in the world that you have no control over that I got enough of that going on in my life. That we'll stick with that. But should you decorate your lawn? When you drive down the street and you see a heavily decorated lawn, is the first thought, man, that person's a real strong Christian? Or is the first thought, oh boy, they really get into this stuff? Like, I'm sorry, the way I judge it, and yeah, you could say, well, that's judgmental.
Joe's pretty judgmental. Yeah, that's it.
I am. We got a house that has all of the ghouls and everything very close to us. And every day I drive by, my first thought is not, he's probably a strong member of the church going to White Bluff Church of Christ. Maybe he is. He might be. And maybe that's a judgmental jerk part of me. I don't. So no, I don't. I won't be decorating my lawn unless you're talking boxwoods and some ferns and whatnot. I decorate in that way. So there you go, year round. And churches on trunk or treat. What's funny is a lot of churches have problems with nativity scenes, but they're perfectly fine with trunk or treats. And it's kind of like, oh, that's interesting.
Well, I mean, the logic on that is it's not that hard to understand.
I don't think if we're going to celebrate one versus the other. Oh, well, we're going to be real sticklers on history for one. We're not going to be sticklers on history for another.
No, it's not the history. It's if you think you need religious authorization that you don't have to celebrate one, and the other one you think is something that is allowed to you. I mean, you can see the logic there is not that hard to draw the line.
I don't know. I mean, I think I'm not a big fan of the trunk or treats, but that's fine. I don't like churches mixing with this holiday personally, but I'm not condemning anybody that does it. As you guys said, it's probably best for the kids. If you're going to do it, doing it at a church in an approved, modest way. Okay, that's fine. But I'm not a big fan of it. Go figure. Okay. You had at the end, we're going to run through this. Then I'm going to get to my, think fast here. What we should agree, everybody should agree is off limits is, yes, the Satan costumes. I do think glorifying or making light of Satan, don't do that.
If you're dressing your kid up as Satan, like, give me a break. What are we talking about here? Yeah.
Don't do that. The bloody, the violent, the ghoulish costumes, the very scary. I mean, don't put that in your kid's mind. You may think it looks really cool, but a 7-year-old does not need to go around with that in his mind, that imagery, or thinking that he's scary. Come on. The kids, like, childhood actually matters in this day and age. Immodest costumes, for obvious reasons. Immodest anything, but especially costumes. Don't think this is any different time of year. And glorifying death, destruction, violence, decay through participating in the Halloween. All of the real scary imagery, things out on your lawn. I'm out on those things. I think that's
So Joe, I want to, like I said, I want to ask. So what does your family do for this time of year? I'm not even gonna say holiday, but like this particular thing.
Sure. So we already did carve pumpkins, and we watched Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, harmless kids, fun thing. As Jack said at the beginning, I do want to draw a line between harvest and the Halloween. We already carved pumpkins. It wasn't on the 31st. It's perfectly fine this time of year to go, man, it's pumpkin season. This is great. We're going to carve them. We're going to eat the seeds. We're going to have a good time. No, it's candy season all season, okay. In my opinion. So no, it's not surrounding the 31st of but the way we used to do it as a kid is mom and dad would always buy us a family movie, and they'd buy us all the candy. And that night we would go downstairs and we'd watch a movie, and we'd have a great family. We'd carve pumpkins and have a great family time. We've already done that. I don't have a problem having a family harvest holiday that is recognizing, yes, the rest of the world is celebrating something. We don't celebrate that. We celebrate something different. We're going to kind of claim it for our own. And you could say, well, that's what we're trying to do with our kids. Okay, and that's fine. But I do think that's how we would celebrate it and how we do celebrate it.
Jack?
Oh yeah, no. We, like I said, we went to a trunk or treat thing last year. Yeah, I mean, usually a dress up thing for the kids. If they want to be Mario and Princess Peach and stuff like that, whatever. But Yeah, I mean, just something simple. Again, something controlled environment. We're not going around the neighborhood because you do have some weird, neighbor, just the stuff like that you have to consider. So yeah, I mean, it's again, I think it's degrees. It's a controlled environment, keeping your kids safe, keeping your kids from seeing things you don't want them to see, helping them enjoy a good time, and basically that's it.
Nice. Nice. I might
Will, how
I might
about
be
you?
working. I might be working, so I'm not sure yet. But if I'm not, I think Jackson's gonna get a kick out of handing out candy. So we will probably be indoors, maybe watch Charlie Brown or something, and we'll let him be our candy because we're in a subdivision where they are definitely trick or treating. So we'll probably let him just get a kick out of handing out, Kit Kats and Reese's to everybody. But yeah, I mean, we're still, like I said at the start, we're still kind of navigating all this as parents of young kids. So nothing set in stone, kind of still trying to figure out how we want to do things, as I'm sure a lot of parents are. So appreciate these guys willing to talk about this again. And as always, before we get to Joe's Think Fast, I want to encourage all of our listeners, specifically those of you who are on Focus Plus, let us know your thoughts. Try to get your comments in before Wednesday night because I always think it's interesting to hear other people's perspectives on this. As we said at the start, there's a lot of people that are just even stronger opinions than Joe has about this, and then there are other people that are all into the haunted houses and the all the dark side of Halloween, and so we might disagree, but I am curious to hear your thoughts again as listeners. So Facebook, YouTube, obviously Focus Plus. Let us know what you think. If you have any additional questions that we can address with Friday's Deep End, that's all that I had. So Joe, I guess you can take us away here.
Yeah. So I actually don't have access to my Facebook. I want to pull it up, and my Facebook cuts off during the day, during work hours. But your dad, Brad Harrub, Dr. Brad Harrub, recently posted about Harding University having a woman preacher come to chapel, and this caused quite the hubbub. And I was curious your guys' thoughts on this. That obviously we're gonna back your dad. We're gonna back Dr. Harrub here in
His
his
post
assessment.
has his original post currently has 324 comments and 289 shares.
How many likes does it have? Just out of curiosity, does it show?
462.
Yeah. So this is viral in the church, as far as I'm concerned. This is pretty viral. Anytime you're in the multiple hundreds, like for all across the board, three different metrics being in
Joe,
the
give the
hundreds is
background on what the
a
post was about real fast.
so. And you may have the name there. That's what I was looking up. Is the specific name of the woman
John
that
H.
came?
Walton. Oh, sorry.
No,
That's
Okay.
there's
There's
two sides of
there's
this,
two
yeah.
separate issues. John H. Walton wrote a book that is denying. My understanding is he's basically denying the creation account and basically doesn't view it as literal. This is a growing trend. Actually, he's not alone in this. This is a growing trend, even among evangelicals and those in academia
Well, we
saying,
talked
"Well,
about
we
it
know
on
that
our
that
Bible
wasn't."
study episode last week.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Where it's very easy in our textual criticism world to look at it and go, "Well, either Moses didn't write it, or that's not actually." It's
It's an
more
allegory.
allegorical and things like that. So your dad had a great post on it, which is, and has done a great job. And this goes way back. I think he's called some of these things out of Harding. They've been talking about this for a long time and preach or teaching this in school. That's
So
categorically false. And so on the first thing on this Think Fast is if you can get to a Brad Harrub seminar anywhere in your area, I would strongly encourage you to go to one and shore up your faith and shore up you will run across this somewhere along the way. Somebody will believe or try to convince you that the first 11 chapters of Genesis didn't actually happen. They're all allegorical. Go shore up your faith. Grab a copy of Convicted if you are not familiar with his book. It is fantastic. That would be the first thing that I'd say on this is make sure that you have the talking points down to know this very much did happen. There's historical evidence, these things and such.
the other side of it, Joe, was that they had Tiffany Yeck, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was the devotional speaker in chapel, proceeded to deliver a sermon devotional message, quoting scripture to the student body, spoke about deconstructing and made numerous heretical points, such as encouraging the students to do what makes them happy first, then to worry about what God says. That is quoted from data. That's not a direct quote, but so yeah, it caused quite the stir. Needless to say, it caused quite the stir about this woman being there. So, John, I don't know if you have a question that you're asking us here, but that is certainly kind of in the center of Church of Christ social media right now.
So we're not going to do a full episode on this. I'm going to ask you guys the burning question. And yes, it's burning hot takes here. Should we be sending our kids to Christian schools, to Christian
University.
Christian universities?
The biggest thing for me that I really don't like about these is when Brad posts these, people are like, my kid goes there. I didn't realize this is what happened. And they are very good. I know multiple of them are very good at presenting a very conservative Church of Christ front when in the recruiting process. And then when a kid gets there, it is women preachers. It is the Bible's not literal. It is all kinds of things like that, and that's just dishonest. I heard one of them literally have a argument with Brad years ago, very closely related to all this, and his whole thing was basically stop telling parents that I'm teaching this. And Brad said, "Well, are you teaching it?" Well, that's not what's important. Stop telling parent. Like essentially, it was a PR thing of like I don't want it getting out that this John Walton book is what I'm teaching on Genesis. That's my frustration. Like, be upfront about it. If you're gonna, because that's the other thing. People wouldn't send their kids there. A lot of people wouldn't send their kids there if they knew exactly what was happening. So do your research, know exactly how it is, and if you send your kids, send them in there with their guard up. Would be the thing I would say. I know one of the biggest reasons people do send their kids to these is to find a spouse. That's a pretty compelling reason. A lot of people have found their spouses there and very happily married due to somebody or with somebody they found at their Christian university. Go in knowing, hey, this isn't all just 100% in the clear because it's a Church of Christ school.
Yeah, so I'm pretty well opposed, not opposed. I'm not planning on sending any of my kids to any university, particularly just for the student loan issue. Like it's so expensive living in, with a bunch of other 18 to 22-year-olds doing who knows what. Like I don't care how faithful or righteous my kid is. That's just setting them up for failure. That could go for the University of Alabama. That could go for Freed-Hardeman University. Like I don't really separate those two. I think it's equally dangerous. I think my biggest issue with this whole thing is because of my kind of natural cynicism with it. Like I am not going to get quite as upset about, I guess, I don't know, the liberal tendencies. Like you're going to get those a lot of places. And so I think you need to be fully prepared if you do send your kid to one of those, that they're probably going to be dealing with that kind of stuff. And, so as long as you prep your kids for that, I think it can be done. My biggest issue with it is kind of the fact that so many, like mainly parents of kids who go there, are just blindly supportive of the school because, oh well, my kid goes there, or because, oh well, I went to Freed-Hardeman, or well, I went to Harding and it was great. Like there can be nuance to this. Just because it's quote unquote your school and because you went there and had a great experience and all these things does not mean that what Brad or other people are saying about this is not true and does not need to be called out. Like people have this tribalism, this loyalty to their school, to where they're not willing to call this out and say, what are they doing? Having a woman, first of all, leading a devotional, quoting scripture, and telling the kids to go pursue whatever makes them happy first. Like you should be able to say that without violating your tribalism to your school or whatever. And so I think that's the biggest problem with it, is there were a lot of people on Dad's post that were kind of upset with him for calling that out. It's like, no, that needs to be called out. So I don't know. Those are kind of my thoughts. I think you have to be. I'm not planning on sending my kids to those, but if I did, I would want them to very much have their guard up to the, as Jack said, to the liberalism, to the, I don't know, the tendency to want to push the envelope a little bit when it comes to what the Bible teaches, women's roles, that kind of thing. I mean, goodness knows that's the hot topic for kids is well, women should have equal rights and things like that. So yeah, I'm not a fan of course, that Harding did that, but I think the biggest frustrating thing is Christian parents, and then Christians maybe who are in their 30s who went to Harding that are defending it.
It's the lie closest to the truth that does the most harm. That's what I would say here, is when you are that close, yes, you're Church of Christ, but you're kind of adjacent. It's exactly as the point you guys are making. The kids' guards aren't up. I would rather almost send my kid to a secular school knowing he's going to get a bunch of garbage, and you go in prepped for that, rather than I agree. Oh, I don't know about that. I agree. Maybe.
See, I've heard that argument before.
Way more.
Not that we have time for that. I do disagree with that, actually. I've heard that argument. I think it makes sense. I think the amount of bad influences you get at secular school, like I don't think if I had to choose one, I don't think I'm ever choosing the secular school.
I mean, I'm honestly, if my kids are going to go to college, which is not a guarantee, but we got a long way to go, so we'll see. I would personally do online. I think it's the fastest, easiest, cheapest
that
way
I
to do
agree
it.
With for sure.
Yeah. You stay grounded in your church, you stay around your family, you do it on your time frame, you get to work a job during. There's so many reasons why I would do online. So no, I mean, but at the same time, again, at least in secular, I do. Yeah, you're right. The influence is really bad. There's also a lot of other influences. Like we've been told that
for sure,
Harding keeps the abortion clinic across the street open. Yeah, we think it happens. I had a buddy who found a 6-pack of beer up in his free dorm that some kids had snuck beer into the dorm and were drinking it and snuck it away when they did a house call or whatever else, and he ended up finding it in the ceiling later accidentally. I don't know how he found it, but either way, we think that it's perfectly fine. You don't have any negative influences there. Once again, your guard is down because you don't expect to have negative influences. That's when it's at the most critical time. So yeah, I'm not the biggest fan. We may get flack for this one and people are going to be upset. And how could you possibly say it? Look, kids are vulnerable. So when you start having a woman preaching in chapel, you can make all the excuses in the world, but at the end of the day, you're gonna have a lot of kids that start looking at that as normal, and they're going to come out questioning their Church of Christ religion and dogmas and whatnot, as they'll say, well, why can't we do this? It was perfectly fine for them. It is a slippery slope. We need to be paying attention to those things. So just for parents, keep your eyes open, keep your ears open to these things, and be very careful on where you send your kids. So that's all I had on that one. But fellas, any other thoughts, questions before we? All right, this is going to wrap us. Thank you. Please let us know in the comments. Let us know what you think.
Hey, we are 2
Questions,
weeks away from Think Deeper Live. So if you can join us, Jackson Temple Church of Christ, Burns, Tennessee, just about 30 minutes outside of Nashville. ThinkDeeperLive.com. Let us know you're coming.
There you go. Perfect. All right. We will wrap right there. We will see you in the deep end for our deep thinkers. And otherwise, we'll talk to you next Monday.